can everyone hear me? Frank, you're muted. Thank you. Raphael, or no? And then Frank, I'm still seeing a mute icon on your end. You guys get to watch us go live for the first time, so apologies for any missteps in advance. We usually spend our time working with customers, or in Frank's case, actually building Copilot or Sidekick as it's now called. So please be flexible with us. But yeah, we'll give everyone a moment to join. Frank just left, but he'll be back in a second, and then we will get started. And this might not take the full 45 minutes, but we wanted to leave plenty of time for everyone to ask questions. So we'll monitor the chat, Frank will demo. But if anyone wants to also share any specific questions that they want to cover today, happy to go through those. But yeah, thank you all for taking the time. And awesome. And as Frank is troubleshooting, I'm glad he is running into the issues because he is an engineer, and so he is much more qualified to troubleshoot than I am. So I'm better at talking. I'll stick to that while Frank figures out how to unmute. But awesome. Anyways, we'll just start by kind of talking a little bit about Sidekick, why we started to build it, what the value is. And then we'll go from there. So my name is Gina. I'm on the customer success team here at Dust. I'm based in the US. I've been here for about a year now. And Frank is the engineer. He joined the same day I did. He actually built Sidekick along with a team internally. And he's kind of the DRI of the project internally. And so for the first couple minutes, want to spend a little bit of time kind of just like why we built this, who it enables, so forth. And then we'll demo the the 4 product workflows that fall into it. Goal is really that everyone comes out of this today feeling super well versed. They feel like you understand what Sidekick does, what it enables, and also if you have questions, you can reach out to us after this. But yeah, we'll get to as many questions as we can, and then we'll record the session and send it out. So don't worry if you have to hop early. Awesome. I'm going to get started, and Frank will join later. So I think we've both been here for a year, a lot of context that we've heard from Dust users across the board, and something I feel myself is that building an agent in Dust is super powerful, but also can be intimidating. I personally, when I joined, was not the most technical. I had never built an agent before Dust, and staring at the blank page in the agent builder gave me a lot of anxiety. And so I would often ask the models themselves to help me generate instructions, or I would ask Dust, but I would often run into limitations of it didn't know exactly what I was looking to accomplish. I didn't know if the instructions were specialized to me. And if I wrote instructions, I didn't have a great sense of whether they were good or not. And so I would often actually go tap Frank on the shoulder and say, this is important enough. Can you take a look at my instructions? And that's what we spend a lot of time with customers doing. And so we'll continue to do so, but wanted to give you the tools to do it on your own, not feel like you have to reach out to us every time. And so a couple things here. I think often we hear from customers when you stare at that blank page, that's kind of when the momentum dies. And you're like, I can just do this manually. I'll maybe write a few notes of instructions. The output isn't perfect. You might not want it, what it wanted to do, but you might not be able to get to the point where it just does what you're looking for. And so that's a lot of the reason why we built Sidekick. Internally, we have an agent that writes agent instructions. Some of our customers had built a similar one. And so they were all really kind of enabling this exact same workflow internally. And so we wanted to make sure that capability was available for everyone to kind of solve both the gap from 0 to 1, and then also to take an existing agent and make it as strong as possible. Nice. We have Frank at least on split screen and unmuted. This is awesome. Cool. Awesome. Really, one quick heads up on what Sidekick does. Really, the goal overall is to turn agent building from a blank page problem into a guided conversation. So it lives directly inside the agent builder. You don't have to go find it, it's always just there. And the goal is so that you can describe exactly what you want in plain English. Sidekick drafts the instructions. And so rather than having to constantly flip through tabs, it lives directly in the agent builder, and it'll give you suggestions that you can either accept or reject. And I think the best part about it is it's very aware of your workspace. So it knows what tools you have connected, what knowledge sources are available, what skills exist. So the suggestions are going to be much more specialized to you, your company, your role, your workspace. And so I kind of think of it like having a Frank sitting beside me saying, hey, you should probably use this tool instead of this one, or hey, your instructions would be a lot better if you gave them a role and a purpose, something like that. So Frank is going to show you 4 specific things that you can do with Sidekick. And then, yeah, we'll take it from there.
Great. Thank you, Gina. As Gina mentioned, I am a forward deployed engineer at DUS and had a part in building Sidekick. So I'm going to share my screen and walk you through some flows where we build some real agents.
And as Frank is sharing a screen, if there's anything specific that anyone wants to see, feel free to shout. We're going to demo this a couple times in different ways. So if there's something you specifically want to click, or you have an agent in mind, feel free to pop it in the chat.
Excellent. So there are 3 primary entry points to Sidekick, and we'll go through each one. The first one I'm going to show is if you hit the create button on the center of the screen, you can select an agent from template. You can create an agent from a template. And the first thing to note is we have a whole new set of templates that are available by default in Dust.
Wait, Frank, I'm going to pause you. We have one more technical difficulty. No one can see your screen.
No one can see my screen.
Okay, I think I fixed it.
Excellent.
Okay, great. One more time, start over.
Sure. So as I was mentioning, we have a whole new set of templates that are now available in Dust. These are across multiple domains of a company, from engineering, legal, marketing, etc. So the difference in behavior with the new version of templates is that previously it was essentially a static template where when you select a template prior, it would essentially copy and paste static instructions into the agent builder as a starting point. That is no longer the case. You could now think of a template as a prompt for Sidekick. When you select one of these templates, it'll redirect you to Sidekick. It'll be aware of which template you selected. It'll also be aware of all the tools and knowledge available in your workspace so it can help you build it. Just to show you an example, I'll scroll down to a template called Daily Planning Assistant. And I will select this, and you'll see it should redirect me to Sidekick momentarily. And Sidekick should be aware I selected the Daily Planning Assistant. It should look into my workspace to see what tools are available. Then it should be able to draft instructions and suggest tools directly to the agent. So we'll give Sidekick one moment to work. You can see it's already aware that I selected Daily Planning Assistant. It's asking me, what tools do I use for calendar, for task management, for email? For this example, I'll say Gmail, Google Calendar, and Notion. And behind the scenes, it should be generating instructions based on the template prompt. It should be checking, do I have Gmail, Google Calendar, Notion as tools in my workspace? If so, it should suggest these tools as well as the full instructions. It's asking me permission before executing. I'll say, yes, do it.
And then the one thing I'll add that I thought was interesting as we were building this is we've had it built to be quick right from the start. But the more you ask it to think really deeply about a problem, the more thoughtful and kind of prescriptive the answers will be. So the more you interact with it, the more you ask it to think, the slightly longer it will take. I think that's the feedback we've gotten from any users is, yep, we're happy to take a few extra seconds, wait for a really strong output. But if it ever, you guys have feedback on it, please share. Please email support. Please DM us on something. Let us know. And as it's thinking, Eva has a question of what LLM is powering Sidekick.
So for the first message of the interaction, we want it to be as fast as possible, as Gina mentioned. So we're using by default Haiku, Anthropic Haiku. For the subsequent interactions for actually generating instruction, we're using Sonnet 4.6. If your workspace is not whitelisted for Anthropic for whatever reason, it does fall back to OpenAI models, the equivalents in OpenAI, and then Gemini afterwards.
And Arno, I'm going to let you chime in and say why you're screaming, if there's something we should address about that. And then there's one more question from Vitor. Is Sidekick aware of tool limitations at the user level? For example, if there's a valuable tool MCP we have for a limited number of users, will it suggest that tool be added or not?
Do you mind clarifying what limitation type you're referring to? I'm just trying to understand what user-specific awareness you're asking about.
Vitor, that's a question for you. But in the meantime, I'm going to guess that maybe it's a tool in a specific restricted space. So maybe only a specific subset of users have access to create that tool. What would happen in that case, Frank?
So it is aware of all space restrictions. It will have the same space permissions that you have as a user. So it will first look in the company data space, see what tools can be connected from that space. And if there are not any matching tools, then it will go to the restricted space to see what tools are available in that space. Once you do accept a suggestion from a restricted space, that will make the agent restricted. So it would follow the same behavior as normal that you have without Sidekick. So you can see in this example, it suggests me some basic instructions to add the Gmail, Google Calendar tool, Notion tool, the ability to create frames. So if I wanted to complete the agent building process, I'd go through and I accept each one. Then I should be ready to go. You can see the capabilities and tools added, the instructions created, provided me a name and description of the agent. So my agent building process is complete. From there, I wanted to show you the two other entry points to Sidekick. So I will exit out of this and go back to the main home screen. I'll hit create and create agent from scratch. In this case, if I don't select from a template, it's going to ask me a relatively static message. What do you want your agent to do? So I can get the same behavior by just telling Sidekick explicitly what I wanted to build. I'll say create me a daily planning assistant that checks Gmail, Google Calendar, and stores tasks in Notion. And it will go through the same process that we just saw with the templates. In addition to that, if I didn't know precisely what I wanted to build, I can ask the Sidekick for use case ideas. It is aware of what role you are in your company, what tools, knowledge are in the workspace. So it'll use that information to give you the best agent ideas possible. For example, as an engineer, it might tell me to create a GitHub summary bot or maybe a code review agent. Then it'll help me iterate on the idea. So you can see it's giving me the same plan that we saw when we selected the template directly. The final entry point that I want to show is a feature that we call shrink wrap, and I'll explain what that is. So I prepared an example conversation. This is a fake customer called Fluence. I told Deep Dive, our internal deep research agent, to gather all information you have on the sales opportunity and present it to me in a frame. So what Deep Dive is really good at is figuring out, based on the request, what exactly it needs to do in terms of tool usage and reading knowledge to present this view. The downside of Deep Dive is that it can take a really long time since I didn't really tell it where it needs to look. It has to figure out for itself where the best place to get information, where the tool calls it needs to make. So in the future, if I wanted to make this process reproducible, what I could do is I can go to the top right of my screen and say, convert this to an agent. This gives me a pop-up warning that it's going to redirect me to the agent builder. I'm going to say, okay, let's continue. And what that will do is it will start Sidekick, but it will provide Sidekick all of the context of that conversation. So Sidekick will know what was the content of those messages, the inputs, the outputs, what tools were used, and what it had to search in order to generate that final view. Based on that, it's going to suggest me an agent that can do that in a composable way for future types of use cases.
And Frank, while it's running, there's a question from the group of whether Sidekick follows certain structures, guidelines, or best practices when creating instructions. So for example, structure, markdown, etc. And then a follow-up question on whether it has user-based memory.
So it does follow all of our internal best practices for what we expect the agent instructions to have for best performance. In terms of formatting, it will use Markdown if it deems the instructions too large. I think generally that's around 200 characters. Then if it deems it too large for Markdown, it will use XML. And I think that's probably closer to 500 to 600 characters. So all the best practices that we would have our solution engineers normally build with customers are built directly into here. In terms of individual user memory, that does not exist today. So it won't know across agents, is there a specific preference you had? But what it does do is it retains memory of past suggestions that it had with your interactions with Sidekick within the same agent. So if I had an agent called Go to Market, and I had a specific session in the past where I asked it to give all these suggestions, it'll be aware of those suggestions for the future, especially if I reject those suggestions. It'll make sure it doesn't propose them again in the same exact format. So not memory across agents, but yes, within the context of one agent that you're building. And just to close the loop here, it's analyzed the conversation. It's identified that my goal here is essentially to create an overview of a sales opportunity based on the input of the opportunity name. And I want to create a multi-tab frame that has overview, financial use cases, etc. It's asking me some very valid follow-up questions. When will this agent be used? What type of output do you want? Last time we created this 5-tab frame. Is this what you want for every opportunity moving forward? So of course I can converse with it, answer these follow-up questions. But in this case, I'll just say create the agent as described above, and it will go through the normal suggestion path of Sidekick. So super valuable, especially if you're just doing things ad hoc and want to make sure it's reusable in an easy way in the future. So those are the primary entry points I wanted to show for the demo. I'm very happy to answer any questions about Sidekick or agent building overall.
Cool. There's a bunch of questions, and I can go through them one by one. Frank, would you be able to pull up an existing agent that might be underbuilt so that the team could see what it looks like when Sidekick takes a look at that?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
So I'm just going to pick one at random. Let's select this product feedback analyst agent. And what it will do when kicking off Sidekick is it will look at, is there any recent feedback for this agent from the rest of the team? First, focusing on any potential negative feedback. If there is negative feedback, it'll call that out to you and ask, do you want to create suggestions to improve this? If so, I would converse with Sidekick and essentially build improvements so that type of feedback doesn't happen again. In addition, it has all of the statistics on usage, number of conversations, number of messages that got the thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of user feedback, number of individual users that are using the agent. So it starts with an overall summary of the agent usage, and I'm able to converse with it to maybe pull suggestions that I didn't complete last time so I can continue my agent building, or maybe I want some other path where I want to refine it based on the feedback.
Cool. And then we can give it a second to cook on that one. Is there a template that we would recommend for data exploration, looking at BigQuery or Snowflake and Metabase? And so Frank will click back into the templates as a starting point, and I'm going to let him point out the best one.
So I think there's a handful of options there. I'll point out 3 of them. So there is an automated data reporting template where it's intended to query your data on a schedule, then deliver reports to your team via Slack or email. So that's relatively generic. And what I would do if I select that template is just give it more detail on what I want it to query. I could say every day at 9 a.m. query Snowflake for feature usage and send it to the product team via email. One template that's very popular is a self-service analytics template. So this just generally turns natural language into SQL and runs queries against any of your structured data models. It could be Snowflake or any data warehouse. So what I would do when I select this agent is essentially give it any indications of custom objects or abnormal SQL query patterns so that it's aware of this and is able to generate queries for that data warehouse. In this example, when I selected it, it's asking me what data warehouse type do I want to generally query with this agent, Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, etc. I would probably create different agents per warehouse just so it's specialized for those type of data objects, but not entirely necessary. You could create a single agent that's really good at just creating SQL queries for all of the different types. So totally customizable and granular depending on what you're doing with that agent.
Awesome. And then a couple more questions of whether this could also be used for skills, or is it right now just for agent instructions?
So you cannot use this to build skills quite yet, but I think that's a very valid call out and something that we want to look at in the near future. You can use Sidekick to automatically add skills to an agent. but you're not able to create a new skill from scratch quite yet.
Awesome. And then one other one is, can Sidekick be called as an agent in a conversation, or is it just tied to the agent builder? Follow-up question to that is, if you gave it a conversation link, could it use that information to help give an agent, to give Sidekick context?
Yeah, so for the first question, you cannot interact with Sidekick quite yet outside of the agent builder. The thinking behind that is you need the UX in order to visualize what are the current instructions, what are the capabilities and knowledge attached to the agent. I think there were some concerns about the viability of just accepting instruction changes without understanding what are those changes in the context of the rest of the agent. But those are certainly things that we're going to look at in the near future to improve the experience. So very much open to the feedback of everyone here on the direction we should potentially go there. In terms of the second question regarding the conversation link, so how Sidekick actually works with that shrink wrap feature I showed previously is that there is a tool attached to the agent called Inspect Conversation. All that tool requires is a conversation ID, and assuming you have permission to view that conversation, it will pull all of the metadata in order to give Sidekick all the context it needs. If you come at Sidekick and just copy and paste the URL or conversation ID, it will work the same way as we just saw with shrink wrap.
Awesome. And then only last question so far is, if we create multiple agents, do we then have to create an agent to coordinate the subagents?
So it very much depends on your use case. What you're describing there is essentially an orchestrator agent that will call subagent based on the content of the message and essentially wait synchronously for the reply of the subagent. That's a pattern that we see very often. Sidekick does have the ability to suggest subagents for a top-level agent. So the way I would go about that is to tell Sidekick I want to build an orchestrator agent. Maybe I want it to be a command center for all of my go-to-market actions, and I want the agent to be able to call my go-to-market subagents. What I would do is I would just tell that exactly to Sidekick. Sidekick has the ability to search for all the agents you have access to. It should be able to identify, hey, this is a go-to-market agent that is really good as a potential sub-agent for the top-level orchestrator, and then suggest it and add. So I think that's a very viable path. What it would look like is probably building a couple agents independently and then the orchestrator to attach them.
Awesome. I love all the questions. This is awesome. I'm just forwarding them all to Frank and monitoring the chat. Awesome. Looks like no more questions just yet in the chat. But if there's anything else that we can touch on, whether it's about Sidekick, specific questions, or just Dust overall, happy to take them. Domitil has a question of whether we plan in the future to let people monetize agents like GPTs. For example, I have built an agent for a client and I'm not able to give direct access to her. I can take this one. It's not something the team is really talking about right now. I think there's a lot we really want to build that we have ideas around or that our customers are asking for. That one hasn't come up as frequently. I think that there are some edge cases where people have created a secondary account for their customers, got in there, pre-built an agent, but that's not really an infrastructure we are prioritizing at the moment. We're very much focused on kind of like team collaboration, business users being able to build internally with Dust. And so I think that's a lot of where our roadmap is looking right now. Guillaume, can Sidekick be proactive? For instance, Sidekick notices that users typically us specific follow-up questions in conversation after using the agent and suggests changes. Not quite yet, but that is actually the follow-up feature we are working on right now called reinforced agents. So I think this is a good example where Frank mentioned that Sidekick took into account feedback directly given about the agent. I think the second piece of that is exactly what you mentioned. How do we look at kind of the usage across the workspace in a safe and private way, so that the agent can kind of better suit all users? So Frank is actually, now that Sidekick is built, is actually about to work on that exact feature right now. So I have learned not to give ETAs on behalf of engineering team, so maybe he will share that one. But I would say wait, and it's coming shortly. Frank, anything you want to add there?
The only other thing I'll add is there's a really good blog on our page called Reinforce Agents. It sort of describes our ideology and the direction we're going with asynchronous agent improvements. Might be really interesting as a follow-up since it touches on that exact topic.
Cool. And I will try to find that really rapidly and pop it in the chat. Nico gave Domitil a suggestion, and Arno says, I don't even want to know how many tokens Sidekick is burning through. Same. I've been asking it to edit all of my agents, and it's been going to town. Awesome. Any other questions that we can answer for the group? It will delay for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, I know a couple people have had to hop, so we can do time back. Awesome. This recording will go out automatically to all of you. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. There's a bunch of documentation about Sidekick on our Dust website. If there's other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Arno says, I was using Sidekick and it suggested skills. I would say, I think that piece is potentially looking at skills that are already existing in your workspace that you might want to take advantage of. And it is workspace aware, so it knows about the existence of skills as a concept. And then Guillaume is curious if Sidekick can suggest agent ideas based on conversations in the future.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think that looks like maybe an asynchronous version of what I showed for shrink wrap. Maybe it's a version of shrink wrap that are sort of iterating over all the conversations, identifying, is this a good agent candidate? Should I build that for you? I think that's an area we haven't discussed quite yet, but I am definitely interested in going in that direction just because I know how painful the agent discovery process is.
Nice. Great release. Awesome. Thanks, Vitor. We'll pop it into our internal channel so the rest of the team sees that. Awesome. I think that's it on questions. But again, thank you guys so much for joining. And if there's questions after this, feel free to let us know. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much.